Ladies and gentlemen, if you will please rise for our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance, please remove your caps.
Good morning, West McDowell Middle School, parents and friends, and a special warm welcome to our veterans. It is an honor to be welcoming you today on such an important occasion. We're here to honor our service members and to remember the sacrifices they have made and the courage they possess. We're here today to honor our heroes, to remember their achievements, their courage, and their dedication, and to say thank you to their sacrifices. Today we stand up for the men and women who fought for us and returned home with scars and wounds. I am proud to be an American and to live in the greatest country in the world. Lastly, I say to you, all gave some and some gave all. Thank you.
Take a moment to thank a veteran. When you see someone in a uniform, someone who serves us all, doing military duty, answering the country's call, take a moment to thank them for protecting what you hold dear. Tell them that you're very proud of them and make it very clear. Just tap them on the shoulder, give them a smile and say, thank you for what you're doing to keep us safe in the USA.
Heroes. In war, there are and lives taken. Men and women giving their best to defend what they love. They defend their country, their honor, and their people. Some call them soldiers, others call them heroes. Our veterans have risked their lives for us. They have lived through hell and fought with honor. Many have killed and regret doing so. For every life there is a soul, for every soul there is a life. For those who have died, we show great appreciation and remembrance. For those who live, along with them, live through horrific memories of battle, some memories of defeat and some memories of victory. Our veterans were more than soldiers, they were and still are heroes.
Because of you, unknown soldier. Because of you, I am here. Because of you, I am able to live freely. Yet I do not know you, and I have not done anything for you. But there you stand, ready to fight, and there you are, prepared to die for me. You fought before, and you'll fight again for someone you don't know. So thank you, unknown soldier, for fighting for me. I am here because of you, and I owe you my future.
Freedom is not free. There is a price we pay for freedom, for it is not truly free, but rather paid for by the contributions of veterans to buy our liberty. As blood drains from their body and runs like a river through the grass, over the years it's forgotten. War is placed in our past. I don't think we all realize the importance veterans play as they voluntarily serve America each and every day. We should honor the veterans for they act like a shield, protecting us from danger, keeping America healed. So if you would take a second to commemorate, you will instantly see we owe veterans our gratitude, for they are the reason we are free.
Good morning. Thank you for letting me be here today. It's an honor and a privilege to stand before you. My name is Adam Ledbetter. I grew up right here in McDowell County and attended the same schools as I'm sure many of you did and will. That includes this school right here. Of course, back then it was called West McDowell Junior High. I graduated McDowell High in 2001 and began going to McDowell Tech right after graduation. Once I got my associate's degree in college transfer, I then attended Appalachian State University where I graduated with my bachelor's in 2006. If you'll notice, there was a 5-year gap between high school and college graduation. Most people do it in 4 years, but not me. I've always joked that it took me 3 years to get a 2-year degree and 2 years to get a 4-year degree. But the important part is that I stuck with it and I finished. After graduating from App, I moved back home where I lived with my grandparents for the next 2 years. My grandmother, Nancy, was married to one of the finest men that I ever knew. His name was Robert Walker Teeter, or Bob. Bob was a fighter pilot in World War II and flew 90 combat missions in his Republic P-47D Thunderbolt. After Bob left the United States Army Air Corps, he continued to fly regularly for over 60 years right here out of our very own Marion Shiflett Airport. Now to back up just a little, I'd been flying with Bob for some time before I ever graduated from Appalachian State, and I knew upon graduating that I wanted to get my pilot's license and put in an officer packet to fly in the United States Air Force. So I obtained my private pilot's license shortly after graduation and submitted an application to become an officer. Long story short, I was not selected, but I did not let that deter me. I immediately made the decision to join the Air Force through the enlisted route. My job in the Air Force was an avionics technician, concentration in integrated flight control systems on heavy aircraft. This basically means I was an electrician that could work on anything from a B-1 bomber to our military's largest aircraft, the C-5 Galaxy, and every other heavy aircraft in between. After completing my tech school at Shepherd Air Force Base, I received orders to my permanent duty station, Moody Air Force Base in Valdosta, Georgia, where I was assigned to the 41st Helicopter Maintenance Unit. When I got my orders and I saw that I was assigned to helicopters, my first reaction was, a helicopter is a heavy aircraft? It makes sense. Nonetheless, I went where I had but no choice to go and quickly realized how awesome of a mission I was now a part of. The mission was combat search and rescue. In a nutshell, we were a flying ambulance with two 50 caliber machine guns mounted to the sides. The mission, in its simplest form, was when someone gets hurt, our guys go in, get them, and bring them back to higher level medical care. The slogan that was our mantra that represented everything that we stood and fought for was, that others may live. It was something we took very seriously and forever kept at the forefront of our minds. We knew what we did could potentially save somebody's life. It was noteworthy enough that there was a 6-episode documentary filmed by National Geographic in Afghanistan. Sorry, I lost my place. Where they followed our guys in the execution of our mission. The group they filmed was the unit that tagged me and my fellow airmen out when it was time for us to return home. In the documentary, you will see mustaches painted on the front of the helicopters. That was done by my buddies while we were there. I know you're probably wondering why we would paint mustaches on a helicopter. Well, it's simple. Our call sign on the radio was Pedro. Pedro, on our patch, had a very prominent, thick, black mustache. So it was only fitting that we painted mustaches on the front of our helicopters. The fact that this documentary exists is something that is very special to me, and I'm thankful that I can share it with others. In my 4 years, I was deployed 3 times. I spent the winter of 2010-11, winter of 2011-12, and summer of 2012 overseas, all totaling over a year in theater. My first deployment was to Balad, Iraq. Iraq was fairly uneventful and quite honestly pretty boring most of the time, as we didn't alert just a few times while I was there. Things had calmed down for the most part, and the unit that had replaced us in Iraq actually shut down operations and moved locations right after we left. My fondest memory of Iraq is one that most will be able to relate to, and that's cornhole. I unofficially, along with my fellow airman Alex Lee, hold the world record for the longest game of cornhole to have ever been played. Our game lasted almost 2 months. I know you're wondering how this is, so allow me to explain. At the beginning of every shift, we would perform what is called a FOD walk. FOD stands for Foreign Object Debris. This is a walk that starts and ends in the same location. We would spread out in a line, walk the flight line with our eyes to the ground, looking for anything that could potentially end up getting sucked into the inlet of a turbine engine or anywhere else that it didn't belong. Our beginning and ending location was at the far end of our maintenance clamshell, where you guessed it, our cornhole boards were. Every day, Alex and I would take one throw, one turn, throwing bags, always remembering the score from one day to the next, until some 50 days later, it would finally come to an end. It was often the little things that kept us going while spending months, thousands of miles away from home. And in case you were wondering, I won the game of cornhole. The second place I deployed to was Afghanistan, but I'll come back to that. The third deployed location was Ali Al-Salem Air Base in Kuwait. Kuwait was much the same as Iraq. There wasn't a lot going on, and we had very few alerts. I was there during the summer, and when I tell you it was hot, it's hard to compare to anything around here. But it felt like a blow dryer that was constantly on and sometimes had brown powdered sugar mixed into it. Much of our equipment on the helicopters was failing on a daily basis, and it was very costly to replace. A lot of times it felt kind of pointless that we were even there. Personally, I believe the lack of action for what we were there to do and the cost of keeping our helicopters airworthy is why we were paid a visit by the future Air Force Chief of Staff, Major General Goldfein, where he told us we were shutting down operations in Kuwait. This meant that we got to come home a little bit early, which none of us complained about. So as I stated a minute ago, my second deployed location was in Kandahar, Afghanistan. This deployment was very different from the others and definitely felt like a war zone. We ran rescue missions multiple times a day, all while enduring mortar attacks from an enemy of cowards. I would like to tell you 2 stories of my time in Afghanistan before I conclude my speech. Story 1. It is our second day in country in Afghanistan, and we are familiarizing ourselves with the base. We are driving around in what would be our mode of transportation from the barracks to work every day. It was a beater of a right-hand drive stick-shift van. We knew that our van would need gas, so we set out in search of the gas station. Now, the gas station was not like what we know of with lights and gas prices like gloves and all the things to make it obvious that this is where you know you're getting your gas. But it was in fact just 2 Afghani nationals standing beside 2 inconspicuous pumps where their job was nothing more than to stand there and pump everyone's gas for them. After we had gotten our gas, we were off to continue exploring what would be our home for the next several months. Much the same as our cars here, our van had a spare tire. This tire was not mounted underneath the vehicle where it was supposed to be, but rather just stuck standing up behind the rear seat in the back of the van. This meant that every time we went around a corner, the tire would go from one side to the other. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing I knew, I heard a boom and felt a percussion against my body that for a second I thought was just a spare tire. It was about this time we went around a corner and people were scattering and sprinting toward bunkers for shelter. I then looked up into the sky directly in front of me about a half of a mile to see this giant mushroom cloud rising into the sky. I quickly realized that boom I had heard and felt was not the spare tire, but a bomb that we later found out was detonated on a fuel truck. I vividly remember thinking, this is only the second day. I'm not going to make it here. Fast forward to that night at work. I was on the 0100 to 1300 shift. That's 1 o'clock in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As we were sitting around the computers that night, somebody said, hey, look, that explosion made world news. I read the article where it told us that 7 people had lost their lives in that explosion earlier that day. I knew then this was real, and I got to be honest, I was scared. Story 2. While serving in Afghanistan, I volunteered for CASF, C-A-S-F. This stands for Contingency Aeromedical Staging Facility. Essentially, this group exists to transfer wounded warriors from the on-base facility to the airplane that takes them to more advanced care out of country. The last night that I volunteered with CASF, we were informed that we were transferring an ID explosion patient from the hospital to an awaiting aircraft. The major wanted experienced people to help with the transfer, as it was going to be a 2-man litter carry from the vehicle onto the airplane. So I was one of the chosen to help. As I walk into the ICU of this hospital, I see a heavily bandaged person laying on a litter with what looks like 200 pounds of medical equipment on a rack above him. As I'm looking at this poor man who lost both of his legs and one of his arms just 18 hours prior, I look over to see something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. There are 2 Afghani children laying there on hospital beds with limbs missing and bandages on their heads. They look to be around 12 to 13 years old. And I was just in complete shock of what I was looking at. It was the most surreal moment of my life, and all I kept thinking was, I am definitely on the right side of this fight. Now, I don't tell you these stories to scare you. I tell you these stories to bring to light the sacrifices that have been made and are still being made by so many to sustain the freedom that we have. We live in the greatest country in the world, and that is because of what generations of men and women before us have done. So I implore upon you to, whenever you see the older gentleman with the Vietnam vet hat on, or the Korean veteran hat on, or the young lady with the Operation Iraqi Freedom shirt on, that you tell them thank you. Thank you for your service. And when you tell them thank you, say it with sincerity and say it from the heart. I would like to conclude with one thought to leave you guys with. One word. And that word is kindness. If all we have in this world is kindness, then take and spread it as far and as often as you possibly can. Thank you again for allowing me to be here today. May God bless each and every one of you, and may God bless America. Thank you.
Army. The Army is the oldest branch of the military and was established in 1775. The Army is considered to be the ground force of the military. Even though there are aviation units within the Army, their main missions are on the ground, and the majority of the soldiers who serve have a job related to ground forces. The Army is the largest branch of military, along with active duty soldiers. The Army has two reserve components, the Army Reserves and the National Guard.
The Marines. The Marines are the second smallest branch of the military. Their purpose has changed somewhat over the years, however. When it was first established in 1775, it was under the Navy as a ground force element of the branch. The Marines were basically assigned the task of taking over the beaches when the Navy brought them into a mission. In 1798, the Marines were established as their own separate branch, and since that time have slowly moved more towards ground force operations. While they do have their own air support, they are still mainly supported by the Navy for air operations, and of course, by the sea operations. The Marines, however, do not have their own medical corps. You will not find jobs for medics, nurses, or other medical personnel if you choose to join the Marine Corps.
Navy. The Navy was established in 1775 and considered to be the defenders of the seas. While those serving in the Navy also operate on land, their main mission is on the sea. The Navy is also a main supporter of the Air Force in providing Air Force carriers for transporting aircraft and providing a runway for the aircraft. Like the Army and the Air Force, the Navy does have a reserve component associated with it.
Air Force. The Air Force is the most recently established branch of the military and was officially established as a separate branch in 1947. Its main purpose is to support the security of the United States through air and space exploitation. It is a main supporter of ground forces by providing air support during missions. The Air Force has two reserve components, the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserves.
Coast Guard. The Coast Guard is the most forgotten branch of military service in many circumstances. While also being the smallest branch, many people do not realize that the Coast Guard is a separate branch with active duty military members. The Coast Guard was originally established in 1790 and has undergone several changes as to the department it falls under within the government, including the Treasury Department and the Department of Transportation. In 2002, the Coast Guard was moved to fall under the Department of Homeland Security. If the need arises, it can be called to missions under the Department of the Navy. The Coast Guard's primary purpose is to control illegal immigration by sea and conduct sea rescues.
As our assembly comes to a close, may we leave this place with a deepened sense of gratitude for all of those who have served in our armed forces. They truly represent the very best of our country. A ceremony like this takes a lot of planning, cooperation, and collaboration. At this time, we would like to recognize all of those who helped make this ceremony possible. For planning and organizing this event, Mr. Ramsey and Mr. Gardin. For providing all of the flags of our military branches, Mr. Frank Dean. For their eloquent poetic tributes, Miss Gardner, and the West Middle cheerleaders. And for giving the introductions for each of our military branches, members of the West Middle Student Council. For delivering the keynote address, as well as giving an awesome rendition of the national anthem along with his daughter, Mr. Adam Ledbetter. We would also like to extend our appreciation on behalf of West Middle to all of the many community members and guests that are in attendance today. And last, but certainly not least, we want to extend our deepest and sincere gratitude to all of the veterans. You are the very reason for our freedom and the very reason for our assembly this morning. Left one out. Thank you to Mr. John Ballard and the West Middle Band for providing the music.